this computer. All right. Well, good evening. Thank you for joining us again for Creekside Book by Book as we're walking through the book of Genesis. We have just a few more weeks in Genesis, and then we'll turn over to Exodus around the beginning of our next groups quarter here at Creekside. And so that'll be fun. And tonight we're going to be starting in Genesis 34.
Okay,
And over the last few weeks, we've been following the story of Jacob as he's been working his way back. He leaves the promised land and he works for his father-in-law Laban, and then he comes back and he reconciled with Esau last time we saw him and made a pledge to come and see Esau in Seir, but instead he went north to Shechem. And so even though he gave the impression to Esau that he would follow him down, he did not. And he starts kind of doing his own thing. And God was calling Jacob to settle in Bethel, the house of God, which is part of the tension that we're going to actually see in the passages that we're going to look at tonight. But this will wrap up the account of Jacob and Esau's family and transition into Jacob's sons next week. And so we've been talking about how Genesis has these toledotes, which are the accounts of. And so we are going to kind of wrap the account of Isaac's family and then start the account of Jacob's family. And so it's going to be a transition period. And so the end of our evening tonight is going to be focusing on a genealogy of Esau's family, because he is a part of the plan of God and the families that God created that were the nations that would come from Abraham's descendants. And so the book of Genesis captures those families because it's important for the history of God's people. And so tonight, the first section that we're going to look at is actually a pretty disturbing story. And sometimes there's a lot of ambiguity around what's going on in this story, like how things shook out. But part of the tension is Jacob's family were in the wrong place. They were not supposed to really be in Shechem, but they were. And so part of what's happening is that they're the wrong place, wrong time leads to some unfortunate and just tragic situation. So we're just going to jump in with 34 verse 1. And it says, now Dinah, the daughter Leah had born to Jacob, went out to visit the other women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and raped her. His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, get me this girl as my wife. When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the fields with his livestock. So he did nothing about it until they came home. Then Shechem's father, Hamor, went out to talk with Jacob. Meanwhile, Jacob's sons had come in from the fields as soon as they heard what had happened. They were shocked and furious because Shechem had done an outrageous thing in Israel by sleeping with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not be done. But Hamor said to them, my son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us. Give us your daughters and take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us. The land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, and acquire property in it. Then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the price for the bride and the gift I am to bring as great as you like, and I'll pay whatever you ask me. Only give me the young woman as my wife. Now, this, like I said, this is a fairly disturbing account of what's going on. Now, they're in this area where, they were not supposed to be. And one of the tension points as you read through the Old Testament, and specifically talking about the people of Israel in the land, is that they were supposed to be set apart. They're supposed to be different. And Abraham's family, like, they were all living differently than the neighboring peoples. And even so far as Abraham commanding that his son Isaac not find a wife from the neighboring peoples, and then Isaac's son Jacob not finding a wife from the neighboring peoples. The people who are supposed to inherit the promise from God, they're marrying people who are not a part of the Canaanite region. And so here, Dinah is going out to visit some of the women of the land. And so one of the questions on what the writer of Genesis is doing here is Dinah becoming overly friendly with the neighboring nations? And so is she becoming more identified with the Canaanites than she really should be? So that's one of the questions. And in putting herself in a situation where she is outside of God's design for the people, she's also putting herself in a dangerous place. And Hamor's son Shechem takes her and rapes her. And the word for rape is questionable also. The NIV is choosing to translate as rape, but it doesn't have to be that word. There could be a consensual relationship here. It could go either way. But whatever it is not God's design for the people of Abraham's family. They are not supposed to marry with the people from the Canaanites. And so he sleeps with her, rapes her, and then his heart is drawn to Dinah, and he's like, I want to marry her. And one of the tension points here as well is that this may not have been uncommon in the Canaanite peoples, where they would they could have taken a woman and forced themselves upon that woman and then said, I want to marry this woman. That was not unknown in these times as well. And so Shechem might not think he's doing anything wrong. This is where like our culture and their ancient culture collide into each other, and we're like, this is all bad. This is all bad. And so as we are wrestling with these things, we're like, whoa, this is not a great story. And then to see Jacob as a non-angry person here, like thinking through this relationship and seeing that he doesn't immediately react, but he meets with Hamor and Shechem, and like they start talking about what it would look like to marry Dinah to these folks. And this whole dynamic is very, very strange. And they're saying like, hey, we should become one shared people. We should try to like intermarry, and then we can also trade with one another and build community and like really build our nation, our peoples, our tribes together. And so there's a little bit of syncretism of cultures that's happening here as well, which is again not part of God's design for the people of Abraham. They're supposed to be set apart, and through these nations that come from Abraham, the world will be blessed. But at this point, the family of Abraham is still, pretty small, and so trying to maintain their uniqueness is an important part of this story. And so when the brothers come back and from tending the flocks and they hear about what happened to Dinah, they're angry, they're furious, and they go into this negotiation with Hamor and Shechem, because this was a common part of the culture. The brothers would be very involved in wedding negotiations, and we see this with Abraham when he goes to Egypt. Tell Pharaoh that I am your brother, and he begins to negotiate a marriage arrangement with Pharaoh. We see it with Isaac when he goes to the village of the Philistines and starts to do the same thing, where he says like tells Rebecca to tell them that I am your brother, so that they don't kill me. And then he also has a position of negotiation in this dynamic. And so here, the sons of Jacob, who are from the same mom, Dinah and uh, Reuben and Levi, they are part of the same group of, or Simeon and Levi, I should say. They're part of the same like family of Leah's kids. And so they are part of this negotiation with Jacob and Hamor and Shechem. So this is shocking. This is like a grief-filled story. And so we read it, it should be upsetting. And if you are upset, then yes, you are having the right reaction. But let us see what is what's the fallout here. In verse 31, it picks up. Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, "We can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will enter into agreement with you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we will take our sister and go." Their proposal seemed good to Hamor and his son Shechem. The young man, who was most honored of all of his father's family, lost no time in doing what they said, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of their city to speak with the men of their city. "These men," talking about Jacob's family, "are friendly toward us," they said. "Let them live in our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters and they can marry ours. But the men will agree to live with us as one people only on the condition that our males are circumcised, as they themselves are. Won't their livestock, their property, and all their other animals become ours? So let us agree to their terms, and they will settle among us." All the men who went out of the city gate agreed with Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male in the city was circumcised. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted their city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. They carried off all their wealth and all their women and children, taking as plunder everything in their houses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." But they replied, "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?" Now, this is all, again, more intense story here. It is like when you read the Old Testament in particular, and you see the violence and the bloodshed that is often portrayed, we need to keep in mind these are descriptive texts. They are not prescriptive texts. This is not a command from God to go and destroy a village of people when they wrong you. And even here, Jacob is like, this was too much and he's recognizing like what they're doing was not good, but they are doing this out of zeal for their sister. And so as it unpacks, their deceit here is like telling them like, yeah, go ahead and get circumcised, and then we can be one people. And the people of Shechem's family here, they're all like, yeah, this is a great idea. All of the stuff from Jacob's family, that's all going to become ours. Like if we are one people, then the wealth of this one family will become our wealth as well over time. And everybody's like, this is a great idea. Now, Jacob was wealthy because he had deceived Laban. and had worked a plan out to get all of Laban's choice flock, and he's left, and he's in the land now with all of these animals and all of this wealth. And so the people that Shechem and Hamor are trying to convince the whole city, like, this is a good idea. And they're like, yeah, this is a good idea. So they all say, yes, let's all get circumcised, which is not a great plan for the whole town to get circumcised at the same time. And in a couple of weeks ago, we talked about circumcision and with Abraham and his descendants, and circumcision was not unique to the people of Israel. The major difference was for the people of Israel after Abraham, it was something that circumcision was something that they did 8 days after birth. In other cultures, it became a rite of passage into manhood. And so here, like, the people, like, they probably were familiar with other cultures that were circumcising folks, like men, as they came into adulthood. But here, they all just say, like, yes, let's do this. And they all, like, line up, and this day, like Thursday, everybody, we're all getting circumcised on Thursday. And so it would take at least a week to fully recover from the circumcision in the ways that they would normally perform this on adults. And so the Levi and Simeon, they knew this. They knew how difficult this was going to be on them. And so they waited until, like, the worst time of recovery to come and attack the whole city, to wipe out every male. And, part of this, their zeal for this is because Dinah is their sister, their full sister. Remember, Jacob has 4 women that he had children with. And so Leah was his first wife, not his favorite wife, but his first wife. And she had Reuben, Levi, Simeon, Dinah. They were all really close to each other. And then we see Rachel so far only has Joseph, and then Bilhah, and I'm spacing on the fourth one, Zilpah. But the concubines then and the maidservants of Rachel and Leah, they also have kids. So because they're, like, Simeon and Levi are so close with Dinah, they take this very personally. And so their negotiation was completely a deceit. They had no intention of marrying Dinah to this family, but they sought vengeance, and they wanted to maintain their honor as a family. And so even when Jacob pushes back on them and say, why did you do this? Now I am obnoxious to our neighbors, and they could come and attack us. And they said, it's worth it, because we are defending our sister. Part of what is so heartbreaking about all of this too is Dinah it reads like Dinah is a captive in Shechem's house. And so part of plundering the city and killing all the men is to liberate Dinah from Shechem, from the household. And so, this is all, like, so much of just, like, overwhelming craziness in this family that we're like, how did you get here? But one of the challenges is they were not supposed to be here. They were supposed to go to Bethel. They were never supposed to come this far north. And so part of the blame for all of this is on Jacob. Jacob knows where God told him to be, and he went the other way. And so he is troubling here as well. Now, one of the things that we should note as we get moving on through the rest of Genesis is the different tribes of Israel. They are born out of the sons of Jacob. And so Simeon and Levi are 2 of the tribes. And as we get to towards the end of Genesis, Jacob is going to bless his sons. And his blessings to Simeon and Levi are interesting, partly because, Simeon, his land, his allotment in the future is actually going to be inside of another tribe. Like, he doesn't have a ton of space in there. But then also Levi, the tribe of Levi, they don't have really any land because they become the priests. And so reading this story, one of the questions is like, why Levi? Why did Levi family become the priests? If their ancestor here, Levi, is like a vengeful, violent person, what is that about? And when we get into Exodus, we're going to see that Levi's family, they are very zealous for the ways of God. And there's going to be a story where the people of Israel are deceived and they're sleeping with prostitutes, basically from Moab. And this corruption is infiltrating the whole camp. And so Moses calls to the people of Levi specifically and says, like, will you stand for God? And so they do, and they go through and they eliminate all of the people who were defiling themselves with the people from other nations, with the prostitutes from Moab. So that same zeal that we see here in the account of Simeon and Levi defending Dinah's honor, that same zeal is later revealed in Exodus. And their passion for the ways of God, to maintain the purity of God's people being separated from the nations around them, that could be one of the reasons why Levi becomes the priests and the priestly clan. And so it's something to just keep in mind as we're looking at the family dynamics of the people of Israel and their desire to be different, to be set apart. All right. And so the closing question of this chapter is, should we have let our sister, your daughter, have been treated like a prostitute? And the story just, that account just ends there. Jacob doesn't answer. The text doesn't give us an answer. And sometimes when we read through the Bible, we want to like give like 3 easy points and like an application. Sometimes we need to read the Bible and just let it just sit with it, sit with these stories and say, this is painful. This is unfortunate. And, it doesn't always smooth out the way we want it to. And sometimes we just have to be okay with that. And this is one of those stories where it's like, it doesn't really lead to a good application, a good resolution. It's like, this is a grief-filled account. And sometimes we just need to sit with that grief. And so they are there in this town for some time. We don't know really how long, but chapter 35 picks up and it just says, then God said to Jacob, and how long that then is, we don't know between these events. And when God said this, go up to Bethel. Like I told you to before, go up to Bethel and settle there and build an altar there to God who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, get rid of the foreign gods you have with you and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God who answered me in the days of my distress and who has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell on the towns all around them, so that no one pursued them. Now remember, Jacob says, you have made me obnoxious to our neighbors, and they could come and wipe us out. But because these 2 men, Levi and Simeon, wiped out a whole village, the reputation of Jacob's family is spreading. And so where are these foreign gods coming from? Where's all this gold coming from? It's probably from Shechem. As they plundered the city, they probably like brought all of this out. And so, they came from Laban's family, which were not followers of Yahweh. So there was some household gods that we saw that Rachel brought with her. And so there's a lot of just murkiness in the spirituality and the religion of the family of Jacob at this point. And so Jacob is trying to clean house literally and say, listen, everybody, You have these foreign gods, you have these idols in the house. We need to get rid of them. So bring them out and let's bury them. And so they do. He's like, we're going to go to Bethel where I encountered God. And so we need to be ready for that, to purify ourselves. Verse 6, Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. There he built an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, because it was there that God revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak outside Bethel. So it was named Alan Bakuth. After Jacob returned to Paddan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. So he named him Israel. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants after you. Then God went up from him at the place where he had talked with him. Jacob set up a stone pillar in the place where God had talked with him, and he poured out a drink offering on it. He also poured oil on it. Jacob called the place where God had talked with him Bethel. And Bethel means house of God. Bet is house, and El is one of the names for God. And so even here in verse 7, he called the place El Bethel. It's like God's house. And so when we look through this account, we see, he's finally obeying God and coming back to Bethel, and he sets up another pillar, a altar. And these altars were usually a collection of stones that would be obvious that like this didn't just happen. This was intentional. And it was not in a place at this point in Israel's history. These altars were not places where they would perform like an animal sacrifice upon the altar. These altars were serving as like waypoints and markers where significant things and significant encounters with God took place. And so it was there to say, and we'll see this later on in the people of Israel, like when you see this altar, remember this is what the Lord your God did. And so this altar is serving as that purpose as well, to say, remember when you see this, and this is where God showed up, and this is where God met our forefather Jacob and changed his name to Israel. Remember all that God has done. And so as they are following after the Lord and trying to obey God, we see transformation start to take place in Jacob. His name is Israel. His family is turning away from foreign gods. They are becoming more in line with the monotheism of Abraham, who rejected his family and their idols when he left their land and came to the promised land. And so now Jacob is doing that as well. And as they do that, God reaffirms the covenant that he made with Abraham to say, all this land I'm going to give to you, and nations will be blessed through you. And here we see, God saying to Jacob, kings and kingdoms and communities of kingdoms will come from your descendants. This is all part of God's plan and blessing of the people of Israel. And one of the things that we see here is even as God is talking to Jacob, he says, the kings and kingdoms will come from your land. Like kingdom and kings, that was not an afterthought for God. It was always something that was a part of the plan for the people of Israel. And so even though we see in 1 Samuel when the people are calling out to God to say, we want a king like other nations, God was not surprised by this. But it was one of the grief at that point in the history of Israel is that they wanted a king, not because they wanted to follow God's plan. They wanted a king because they wanted to be like other nations, which is the major tension point for the people of Israel throughout the Bible, is they wanted to be like other nations. And so trying to get back into the saying, like, we would love a king, but we want a godly king. We want to honor the Lord with everything in our community and in our lives. And too often people say we want this because we want to be like them. The people of Israel are saying the same thing. So while this was always a part of God's plan for kings and kingdoms to come from the line of Abraham, the tension was that they were trying to just be like the other nations. And we'll get into all of that when we get to 1 Samuel. But first we go through a period of great chaos in the book of Judges, where there was no king in the land and everyone did what they saw fit. And so we have some ups and downs along the way where we see like a king would actually be a great blessing here. So that's just a little note. There's some foreshadowing that we see early on in the book of Genesis that points to the future as something that we should just kind of pay attention to. And so having the idea of a king show up right now is important for later in the history of the people. Let's keep going. Verse 16. Then they moved on from Bethel, and while they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth and had great difficulty. And as she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, "Don't despair, for you have another son." As she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named her son Ben-Oni, but his father named him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Over her tomb, Jacob set a pillar, and to this day, that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. Israel moved on again and pitched his tent beyond Migdal Eder. And while Israel was living in that region, Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine, Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. Jacob had 12 sons. The sons of Leah, Reuben, the firstborn, son of Jacob, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel's servant Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Leah's servant Zilpah, Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Paddan Aram. Jacob came home to his father Isaac in Mamre, near Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. Isaac lived 180 years. Then he breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people, old and full of years. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So, more tragedy as they are leaving Bethel and on their way to see Isaac. And Rachel is giving birth to Jacob's last son. Ben-Oni is the name that Rachel gives as she's dying, and it essentially means son of sorrow. And the grief that Jacob has here is kind of like quickly moved over in the way we would think about it, but he rejects the name that Rachel gives to the son, changes his name to Benjamin, which means son of my right hand, or like son of honor. Like he is my right hand man. Like that's how much he is just so how he esteems Benjamin in this. Rachel, his favorite wife, the wife that he was willing to work 14 years for in Laban's family. And she has two sons, Joseph and Benjamin. And so now Benjamin is born, and his sorrow, he wants to turn into honor. And so we have that. And he buries Rachel on the way and sets up a pillar. And there's an editorial note here that you can still see this pillar to this day. And it's one of those things where it's like, we would love to be able to see this. We don't know where it is. We don't know where this pillar is or where this really was. But for the people, original audience reading this, they would have known, like, oh yeah, that's that pillar. We know what you're talking about. And so he's grieving for Rachel as he's heading home. And one of the things that is troubling here is what Reuben does. Because if you look at the sons of Leah here, these are the first sons. These should be the sons who are most favored, most in line for the inheritance. But Simeon and Levi, they just killed a whole town. Reuben, the firstborn here, he sees his father as grieving, and as a way to try to consolidate power and influence in the city, one of the things that people would do is they would sleep with their father's concubines. Again, different culture. It is not a prescriptive text. It is descriptive. It is just telling us what happened. And so Reuben sleeps with Bilhah. And this is something that Jacob will remember later as he is blessing his descendants, because Reuben and Simeon and Levi, they are all disqualifying themselves from Jacob's favor. And that's going to be important when we get to the end of Genesis. And so he's deprived of leadership. Levi and Simeon are deprived of leadership. And so that leaves us to Judah. And when we see Judah's family, Judah is also in this text. He's in Genesis. He won't prove to be a great guy in just a little bit. And we'll see that next week. But he assumes this level of influence in the family. And eventually we see the line of kings that was promised to Jacob just a few verses before this. That line of kings will come through Judah's tribe. And so all of these family dynamics, they have echoes throughout the centuries for the people of Israel. And so it's all being set up right here in Genesis. And so they're listing through the descendants by here, building a little account of the line of Jacob, and it goes to tell us about then Isaac, who dies, and he lived to be 180 years old, full of years, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. And so last time we saw Esau, Jacob was saying, yeah, I'll totally come see you at your hometown. And then he goes the other way. And so Esau is proving to be one of the most graceful people in relationship to Jacob here, or Israel now is his name. And he comes and they reunite to bury their father. And this is really the last that we see of Esau, this act of burying his father. And the next little section here is what we're going to kind of write out Esau from the as a major player in Genesis. But before we get there, the writer is going to tell us about Esau's family. So let's jump into 36, and this is going to be our last chapter that we're going to look at tonight, because he's giving us these accounts of the different families. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind, we see this pattern of elect and non-elect in the lines of descendants from these major characters. And so Noah, his sons Ham and Japheth, they are non-elect. Shem becomes the elect line through which leads us to Abraham, and then Abraham has oh man, just blanked on Abraham's other son's name, but Isaac, and oh man, wow, my brain just totally evaporated. Isaac and his brother, and Isaac is the elect line, and then we have Jacob and Esau, and Jacob is the elect line, Esau is the non-elect line. But one of the tension points that we see, though, is there's the elect, non-elect, but then there's also anti-elect. And the anti-elect would really be the people who actively reject God's blessing. And that's one of the things that we see here in Esau. When he traded his inheritance for stew, he was rejecting the blessing of God. So he's more of an anti-elect person. And so through the elect, we see that God continues to work his covenant blessings out. And so, but we still want to make sure that we honor the family of Abraham here. And so the writer of Genesis includes Esau's family. So let's jump in verse 36, chapter 36. This is the account of the family line of Esau. That is Edom. Edom would become a major nation in the history of the people of Israel. And so that's why the writer of Genesis is including Esau. That is Edom. Wants people to be like, oh, that's where they came from. So Esau took 2 wives from the women of Canaan, Adah, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Oholibamah, daughter of Anna, the granddaughter of Zibeon the Hivite. Also Basemath, daughter of Ishmael. That's Isaac's brother Ishmael, and sister of Nebaioth. Adah bore Eliphaz to Esau. Basemath bore Reuel, and Oholibamah bore Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. These were the sons of Esau who were born to him in Canaan. Esau took his wives and sons and daughters and all the members of his household, as well as livestock and all his other animals and the goods he had acquired in Canaan, and moved to a land some distance from his brother Jacob. Their possessions were too great for them to remain together. The land where they were staying could not support them both because of their livestock. So Esau, that is Edom, settled in the hill country of Seir. So there's an important little note here and an echo that we should notice. Jacob and Esau are close to each other. Their livestock are too populous, too big, and so their flocks they're competing with each other, and Esau leaves. Now you might say, that sounds like a familiar story. That's exactly what happened to Abraham and Lot, because their shepherds were fighting with each other. And so Abraham says, all right, we need to choose this day. And Lot chose to go towards Sodom and Gomorrah in that region. And Abraham went into the land of Canaan, which is the land that God had promised. And so here we see this again. But the interesting thing is Esau chooses to leave. And he could most likely, he chose to leave because he knew that Jacob was the one who received the blessing from Isaac. And so Jacob had the right to the land over Esau. And so there's that echo here is happening. God is protecting the land for Jacob's family. And so Edom, the nation of Edom is kind of southeast of Canaan and Israel. And so they become this, in the future, they become an enemy nation to the people of Israel. There's something to note here is that the sons and grandsons of Esau are listed as a group of 12. And we also see that Jacob has 12. And so the writer is giving us a design pattern of like, these are how nations start. 12 sons, 12 grandsons, like 12 little tribes, essentially, to start to build out a nation. So this is the account of the family line of Esau in verse 9, the father of the Edomites in the hill country of Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Esau's wife Adah, and Reuel, the son of Esau, and Basemath, the son of Eliphaz, Teman, Omer, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. Esau's son Eliphaz also had a concubine named Timnah, who bore Amalek. These were the grandsons of Esau's wife Adah. The sons of Reuel, Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mitzah. These were the grandsons of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Esau's wife Oholibamah, daughter of Anna, and the granddaughter of Zibeon, whom she bore to Esau: Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. These were the chiefs among Esau's descendants. The sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn of Esau, chiefs Teman, Omar, Zepho, Kenaz, Korah, Gatam, Amalek. These were the chief descendants of Eliphaz in Edom. They were the grandsons of Adah. The sons of Esau, son Reuel, chiefs Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mitzah. These were the chiefs descended from Reuel and Edom, and the grandsons of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Esau's wife Oholibamah, chiefs Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. These were the chiefs descended from Esau's wife Oholibamah, the daughter of Anna. These were the sons of Esau, that is Edom, and these were their chiefs. These were the sons of Seir and the Horite, who were living in the region: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anna, Dishon, Etzer, and Dishon. These are the sons in Seir, Edom, were Horite chiefs. The sons of Lotan, Ori and Oman and Timnah, and Lotan's sister, the sons of Shobal, Alvan and Madat, Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. The sons of Zibeon, Aya, and Anna. This is the Anna who discovered the hot springs in the desert while he was grazing the donkeys with his father Zibeon. Little fun fact: when names are common and repeated, the writer will throw in a little like, this is the guy who found the hot springs. So people are like, oh, the hot springs, yeah, we go there on vacation. Like he's trying to tell you, like, he's the founder of those places that you know about. So he's the guy who invented the hot tub. The children of Anna, Dishon and Holibama, daughter of Anna, the sons of Dishon, Hemda, Eshban, Ithran, and Keron, the sons of Etzer, Bilhan and Zaavan, and Achan, the sons of Dishon, Uz and Aran. These were the Horite chiefs, Lotan, Shobal, Zibian, Anna, Dishon, Etzer, and Dishon. These were the Horite chiefs according to their divisions in the land of Seir. And then these were the kings who ruled in Edom before any Israelite king reigned. Now let's pause there for just a second. Even if Moses wrote the book of Genesis, and tradition tells us Moses compiled most of Genesis at the very least, this line, verse 31, is an editorial addition to the text at some point, after the kings of Israel were established, which was well after the life of Moses. And so somebody came in to say, like, he's trying to root in history and giving an explanatory statement to help the reader better understand what's going on. And so tying it to say, these were the kings who reigned in Edom before any Israelite kings reigned, he's helping us see like continuity. And so sometimes we just want to be open to the fact that there are some editorial notes throughout the book of Genesis, throughout the Pentateuch, that would have been there as a way to bring better clarity for the reader. And that's okay. It doesn't mean like, oh, we can't trust the Bible. No, it's okay that God can still work through clarifying statements. So I just wanted to make that little note, because there are no kings when Moses wrote this part. And so the writer is helping us see like where this is in history. So these are the kings who reigned in Edom before any Israelite king reigned. Bela, son of Beor, became king of Edom. His city was named Dinhaba. When Bela died, Jobab, son of Zerah, from Basra, succeeded him as king. When Jobab died, Husham, from the land of the Temanites, succeeded him as king. When Husham died, Hadad, son of Bedad, who defeated Midian in the country of Moab, succeeded him as king. His city was named Avith. When Hadad died, Samlah from Maskera succeeded him as king. When Samlah died, Shaul from Rehoboth on the river succeeded him as king. When Shaul died, Baal-Hanan, son of Akbor, succeeded him as king. When Baal-Hanan, son of Akbor, died, Hadad succeeded him as king. His city was named Pau, and his wife's name was Mehetabel, daughter of Matred, the daughter of Mezahab. These were the chief descendants from Esau by name, according to their clans and regions: Timnah, Alva, Jahath, Oholabama, Elah, Penan, Kenaz, Teman, Mibzar, Magdiel, and Iram. These were the chiefs of Edom according to their settlements in the land they occupied. This is the family line of Esau, the father of the Midianites. And this is where Esau and his account stops. We do not get a record of Esau's death. And partly that could be because Esau despised his birthright and traded it for stew. But we're told like Esau kind of just fades off into the sunset. All the other, line in the elect line, we get their patriarchs, how long they lived, how long they died. And so here, instead of seeing how long Esau lived, we just see his family lived on, became the Edomites. And even here in the last section, we see these different kings succeeding all these other kings, and some of them don't look like they were, sons of the previous king. There might have been some war, might have been some conflict that led to succession, and that is not a straight line from son to son to son to son. And so, they're giving us this picture of Edom as a place with a little bit of conflict, a little bit of war, and why they will become an enemy for the people of Israel, the descendants of Jacob, later. So that's our text for tonight, what we're going to cover. And so, any questions? I know ending on a genealogy is not the most fun way to end, but it is the end of an account. So yeah, I'd love to hear if you have any questions or thoughts. We went over a lot of stuff, some of it really messed up and disturbing. But yeah, what do you got? Any questions? Well, cool. All right. Well, we covered it all then. So there's there is these are some interesting passages, and as we look through the Old Testament, as I said before, there's going to be some things that we're like, I don't like that. And that's the right reaction. We should not be like, oh yeah, Simeon and Levi, awesome dudes. Nah, they're not. But also Jacob, he's not that great right now either, because he's like just sitting there like, well, I don't know what to do about this. So Carrie, were you going to say something?
Quizzically, I mean, militarily, being in the military, it was like strategically their tactical maneuver to, to get in there. Oh, we can, strike them while they're low. That kind of scenario. Yeah. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. And they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And we see, the family, Abraham, he was a military minded person at one point too. He was able, with his 318 men, to overcome the Eastern kings. Like they have a heritage of warfare of a kind, but here, like, their warfare is deceitful, and they knew what they were doing. They knew, like, if we just weaken these people, just give it a couple days and they won't be able to defend themselves, which again is like, yikes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It is a very, very bizarre story. So.
Yeah. I heard things. Does anybody else have this? When you go into the genealogy of it, that's where I get lost.
Mm-hmm.
The who, we got who. It's like hard to follow, but I understand your concept of, there was a blessed line and a non-blessed line kind of scenario. And I never understood that before. I was like, why is this always in the Bible? This who we got who? I don't get it. But now I'm starting to see a little bit more clearly.
Well, good. Yeah. And that's part of the goal. And like why I'm not skipping over the genealogies when we come to them is because the writer put them in there for a reason. They want us to understand that the nation of Israel is rooted in the community that had all these other nations starting. Mm-hmm. And so while we don't know who these people are, the readers probably did. The original readers probably were familiar with some of these different families, like pointing out, like, that guy found the hot springs. Like, they would have known about the hot springs. And so, like, it's like, Ray Kroc, the guy who founded McDonald's, like, oh, I know about McDonald's. Like, oh, that guy? Okay. Like, it's that same kind of thing. Like, you know about this. This is the guy who found that. So, yeah. Which is, again, just kind of strange. Like, it's not something that you want to preach on ever. Like, if you come across this on a Sunday morning and you're like, oh man, this is the text we're preaching today, the line of Esau, what are we going to do with this? And you just read as fast as you can. So.
Well, thank you for opening my eyes to that whole scenario. I never understood why there was all the genealogies. Yeah.
And this Sunday, we actually have something like a genealogy that I'm going to actually kind of jump over some stuff as we go through Nehemiah. It's this guy built this section of the wall and this family built this section of the wall. And I'm not going to read all of that on Sunday because it's like, I don't have enough time for us to know all of these little things. But, it's there to, like, just root the text in the world. Are you raising your hand, Tony? No? Okay.
Exercise. I'm just stretching.
Okay. This whole Zoom thing is a weird world that we're in. It's so, like,
it's okay.
I've watched my kids do Zoom. Like, they never turn their cameras on ever. And so just like, do the teachers even know you're here? Like, what's going on? So, yeah.
No.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, then I'd like to pray for us. This last couple weeks have been crazy in our world. And
Yes.
so
Weeks to come.
it's not going to get easier over the coming weeks. Things are going to be tense in our world. And so I want to pray for you just to be agents of peace and to find your peace, not in the kingdoms of this world, but in the Lord and his goodness for us. And so let me pray for us. Father, we thank you that you care very much about our lives, and you pay attention to kingdoms and rulers and transitions, and like we see this in scripture. You know all of these things are happening, and Lord, we know that our country is hurting in so many different ways and for so many different reasons. And so help us as your followers here in our region. Help us to not get wallowed down in all of the fighting and conspiracy theories and arguments about these temporary leaders. But Lord, help us to lift up our hope in you always. And so we do pray for your peace to fill us when we see the news or hear about things that are going on. I pray, Lord, for peace in our own hearts. And I pray that you would help us to share that peace with others, that they would know that we trust you and that they can trust you also. And so let us make the most of this season, the most of this opportunity to point people beyond the temporary leaders that we elect to point to a greater hope that never fails in the fact that we have salvation and security in you in all times.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen.